we have a very special guest on the show with me today. And she wears so many caps that I don't think I'm going to try saying all her roles off head. So I'm going to read out every single thing that I know that she has accomplished or that she is. So we have Mrs. Olubi Lilian. Lilian is her first name on the show with us today. She is the CEO of um, EFG Hermes Nigeria, which is a subsidiary of EFG Hermes Group, which is an investment company that is in over 13 countries across four continents. Yes, four continents. She is also a board member of several companies, including Primera Africa, which is an investment company. She also sits on the board of Volution Cap, which is a company also into investments or finance, and is specialized in financial education as well as creating wealth for Africans in the diaspora. You might know her more popularly for her role as a boardroom judge in the very popular reality TV show for entrepreneurs called The Next Titan. She's featured on several of the seasons of that show and has done so well in it. She's also the co-founder of Drug Aid Africa, as well as the founder of Gold Lilies, which is a company that is impact driven and is also responsible for the very successful screenplay that we watched late last year called Odeme. So I
Osa-
Osademe.
Osamide.
Osa, forgive me. You know I'm not Ishekiri,
It's
but please
it's
pronounce it.
Shakiri.
Okay, okay, all right. And there's one more thing I forgot to mention. She also sits on the governing council of the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers in Nigeria. So you're very welcome to the show. I hope I got all the accolades right.
Thank you, Bumi. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm super happy to be here.
Okay. So I thought I would start by me telling you a little bit about the podcast and why I thought you'd be such a fantastic person to interview. So what I try to do is to interview people doing what they love for a living, because my psyche is that sometimes we get stuck in one thing, maybe a job that we've done, maybe not necessarily because we love it, but because it pays the bills. Or we might actually love it, but we have the capacity to do much more, So whenever I find people that have successfully transitioned into something totally different from what they started with, or maybe they're doing both and they're doing it very successfully, and it's something that they enjoy doing and they've been able to derive a living from it. I want to document it, to showcase it, so that people listening to the broadcast, no matter what endeavor they are trying to pursue, might be able to find some sort of example or inspiration to follow their dreams as well. So you're very welcome again.
Thank you. And thank you. And well done for what you do, Bumi. Awesome initiative.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to start with the beginning. I know that your specialty is in equities. But what led up to that? As in, is there something in your childhood that let you know that finance would be your call, or that the arts would be your call, since you've delved into the theater arts as well? So give us a bit about your background.
Okay. Let me see. Where's a good place to start? My father was in finance. My
Well,
father
okay.
was in capital markets specifically. Literally all my life. I think I was born in Kaduna when he was at the Central Bank of Nigeria in Kaduna. So
Wow.
he was not just in the capital markets; he was actually in the apex regulatory body of the capital markets, the SEC, and was at the helm. Um, so all of my life, literally, I've known about, I guess, capital markets background, but not as if it was something that I was interested in or was in any way learned about. But and for the longest time for me, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was one of those people that discovered very late. How some people from when they're younger they know exactly what they want. All
I was one of
yeah,
them too. I found out
all
late.
through university, Bumi, I didn't have a clue. So back in secondary school, of course, I had inclination towards social sciences and a bit of the arts. And conveniently, I chose to study business administration, which was kind of an easy middle. And but all of university time, I still, literally didn't know I just knew a few things about the kind of role I wanted, which I knew was something that was going to be very human interfacing. I knew I was a people person. I wanted something that was front office and all of those things, but I didn't know. But in my final year, I decided to write my thesis about the Central Securities Clearing System, which is a capital markets clearinghouse system. And my choice of that topic was because my father was in the industry, because I knew that I would have access to good material because of where he sat. So that was where it started. And in that process, of course, I was going to the stock exchange every day in the library. I was introduced to some capital market operators and I was gathering information. And as I was learning about the background of capital markets, I found it very interesting. I just liked the origin of equities and stocks. And of course, being in the stock exchange, I would interact and see the brokers. And one of the days I was collecting material, I stood at the balustrade of the stock exchange overlooking the trading floor. Then it used to be a manual trading um, floor system. And I was watching the brokers. I think they were having some ceremony. And I was staring at them. And I just literally, what felt like a light bulb moment. In that moment, I think I realized this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, a trader. I wanted to be an equity broker. I literally thought for the first time felt I now know what it is. And that was, they say that, the journey began from there in terms of searching, as soon as I was done with school, the opportunities to start my career in that space and, of course, develop myself academically to be a licensed broker and the likes. So that was how.
Wow.
So I guess it was a bit of a confluence of everything, right? But obviously, I think my father had a big role to play in that interest.
Okay, right. Okay, that's fantastic. And I think if I want to bring a bit of religion into it, I think sometimes God is very deliberate about the path that we take, and we might not even realize it sometimes that He's ordering things around so that we know we get to where we ought to get to. But He is, you know,
Always.
nothing is ever by
Yes,
chance.
yes. And we connect the dots, looking backwards a lot of times. But it always connects. And sometimes you don't always see it when it's happening going forward, but then it's always, always the way
Exactly.
it is.
Okay, so let me move forward a bit. So you eventually moved from CSL Stockbrokers to Afri Invest, and then later on set up or co-founded a company called Primera Africa
Securities, yes.
Securities, right? Okay, so I'm just wondering because you look pretty young. What gave you the confidence to leave paid employment in Afri Invest to set up something entirely new? Considering I looked at the time you started, and the capital markets, I don't think it had fully recovered from the 2008 crisis. I don't think even now it has even recovered. So, what gave you the confidence to start something on your own, especially in equities?
Okay, so this was how it happened. And again, back to what you said about just, the path and the way things connect. That it wasn't as much a, a documented intention purely. When I was in
Okay.
AfriInvest, I worked with a colleague of mine, Boye. We worked very well together. I was heading the retail sales, he was heading the institutional sales, and we were friends. And he had always talked about, this idea about building something in the market space and building a finance company. We'd always just talked about it. But interestingly, I had left AfriInvest because I had, two children in quick succession after a long wait, and I wanted to take time off to be with my young children. And so I was out of the market for what was a couple of years, almost about 2.5, 3 years, and not even in the headspace of wanting to go back to work yet. When my former colleague, then approached me that he was ready to, start this thing he had always talked about, and at that point, I still, I struggled a bit because I wasn't still sure of the timing. I was just about getting ready to consider what next, but it was very, I guess, a good, perfect timing. And so I was helping him out, not being sure I wanted to be, but at a point it was just like, he was like, Lillian, there's nobody else that can do this, with me at this point. And of course, we agreed to start. And so we just took that leap of faith almost, and it started off thought that was something to be. I was meant to be starting off in a consultancy role, trying to help out, but eventually, he said, "Look, this is full time. Let's do this," and literally plunged in. We plunged in, and it was quite a plunge because we went in by an acquisition. We acquired an existing company, and then started the business literally almost from because it was a different business model that we chose to run, and so we started just trying to gather all the clients, creating material. Primary Africa was a subsidiary of a group company, and so the securities business was just the first part that we decided to launch with, and so very rigorous in terms of trying to get funding for the business, trying to get the clientele base that we desired. Um, and of course the staffing and complements of building that business. So very intricate and beautiful process. It was very tasking, but it was very fulfilling having to build a business that came from literally almost to ground zero to what then became a top 10 company on the Nigerian stock market in less than, I think it was 2 years, which was commendable, especially for a company that was purely indigenous, and as opposed to the other companies in that range that were foreign based in their constituency. So that was how it started essentially, and then we ran the business for about 6-7 years with other businesses that were also growing from Primary Africa, and then leading up, of course, to the subsequent acquisition later on.
Okay. So do you think part of your success was your pedigree and the pedigree of your co-founders, and did that help in achieving some of the goals in terms of customers, in terms of raising finance? How easy was it to acquire customers? Did they just come because of your pedigree, or did you have to do a little more?
Bumi, it was not. It was a combination of things, and definitely the network that one has built helps. The relationships over the years, the reputation, because you find that, and
Exactly.
when in terms of the capital raising part, you found that a lot. That's when you really understood what trust was. That sometimes we come in with this expectation that people are just ready to help you when you start a business, but it's not the case. But understanding at that point how important it was that we built trust from people who we had served and who we had known and who I had worked with. We came in at a very difficult time in the market, and
Yeah.
you alluded to that already, but it was a disadvantage and an advantage. And that we could have seen it, and some people thought we were crazy, like, what are you doing in capital markets at this equity capital markets in this time, just getting through that recessionary period. But we came in and we decided to be very clinical about our approach. We had literally, our focus then was heavily institutional clients. We wanted the local PFA market. We had just one from the company that we had acquired. And we went in very methodically. It was so interesting. We had literally all the companies that we targeted, literally printed pictures of board members, management, everything. And we were literally going one by one. In some cases, bottom up, in some cases, top to bottom, looking for leads who could introduce us to people. We got in sometimes the same narrative of people telling us, but we're not doing anything now, you know how the markets are. And it was just, and this is where I say it played to our advantage, that it was, okay, you're not doing anything now, but sign us up. The market will turn. And what seemed, then like a boring fit ended up, being a good one. That by the time we were done, we had this portfolio of local PFAs that was a considerable size, relative to the start of our business, that now, of course, paid off, and which, of course, was also an advantage when it was time for the subsequent acquisition. So it was a lot of hard hitting. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of drawing from network, drawing from our abilities. Of course, we had gained a lot of experience. My partner at the time, also with the advisory experience that he had. In my case, the networks of people that I had, and everything, we pulled everything we could to make it work. And of course, we started and also learning on the way. There's something that nothing prepares you for, that you get to learn as you journey along. But yes, all of it, I think, together came along.
Wow. You said something really interesting about how how to see disadvantages, you know, because I think that sometimes maybe that's the strategy. Because if it was obvious, if it was an obvious success, there would be competition, and you might not have succeeded as well as you did. But because the markets were down, not too many people were trying to set up companies in that line because they didn't think that
Yeah.
there was anything
Yes.
there. It was an advantage to
Yes.
you, you know. It,
And we could have still not have
okay,
recognized it, but that's we chose that no, this is market are in cycles, it will turn. And what can we use this season for judiciously?
you know, and that's a learning point. Really, it's similar to someone else that I spoke to on another podcast who had a similar experience. As in, the times were not right, but it was right for her because nobody else was in that space, because it just didn't seem like an obvious
Yes.
choice to go into at
And
that
nobody
time. You
was
know,
hitting
so
hard the way we were hitting hard because everybody was also, so even our competitors were also in that mode. And we came in with an aggression that didn't fit the mood and tempo of
wow,
the time.
interesting stuff.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a bit about the acquisition, the one that
Yes.
EFG Hermes did. As in, how did they come along? Did they identify you, or you were at that time already ready to sell, so you were already looking for investors? How did it work?
Yes, so we had done the business for 6+ years, or was it 7? And a lot of things were already happening also on the group construct with other parts of the business that were taking some attention. And then also the business model was changing a little bit. We did go through some challenges and we were very open to seeing what sort of collaborations could happen in whatever form. So that was the mindset we were in. The advantage, of course, was that we were able to tell people about that space we were at, such that and it was just a beautiful, perfect marriage, such that EFG, who of course had been very dominant in the North Africa region, and Middle East region. They were trying to build their frontier market space, and they had started in, I think it was Kenya and Pakistan, a few other regions, and they were trying to come into Nigeria looking for a collaboration or a suitor, so to speak. So we had told somebody, so they had spoken to somebody, I think, about their interest, and the person happened to have known that we were considering collaborating or selling, and then they approached us. We had it to our advantage that they could have come in wanting a fresh license, but they didn't want to come in to a fresh license. They wanted somebody who was on ground, who had also, because they were very strong on the international institutional space, of course, being in all these countries, lots of the clientele base were there, and they needed the strength of the locals. They needed a company that had a strong local base, local institutional
Sense.
base. And so it fit quite well. We were also fortunate that we aligned in terms of the value that we offered. We were fortunate also that regardless of the challenges we may have been going through, there was transparency, there was disclosure. We had, we're quite accountable. So for an institution like that, of course, that comes in, they come in rigorously with proper due diligence, and so we could scale all of that. And I think also EFG being it's a listed company. They're actually listed on 2 exchanges. And so you can imagine what corporate governance looks like for an institution like EFG, but also from a cultural standpoint, also very ethically conscious. And so I think it was very important that they met people who they felt were what's the word I would use? Well, people of reputation, I would put it in that way. And so there was good energy that flowed in that discussion, and things went pretty seamlessly. And yes, and so the marriage took place in February, I think, of 2019 officially. It was in January, and we then sold the business 100% to AFG.
Wow. Okay, so in terms of your value proposition between before the acquisition and after, did your value proposition change dramatically?
Dramatically, yes and no. So we had a while we were premier, we also, even though our focus was very high on institution, we had a large retail base.
Okay.
EFG were, came in with intention to do purely institutional markets. So we had to let go of the retail side of the business, which we were
Okay.
happy to pass on to another firm that was building their retail franchise. And so it changed on that, just on that level. But on the main levels of the institutions, it was perfect harmony with the locals and the foreign clients that they had. And so we continued in that format.
Okay. So, but you are still the CEO of the local company, even though you've sold the old entity Premier. So how does that work? You sold it, but you're the CEO. So is it that you don't own it anymore, but you run it, or how does
Yes,
it work?
yes, purely. So I'm purely an employee now of BM Airways. Yes, we sold the business 100% to them, and they asked me to stay on as the CEO, which I agreed to, and so still on with them as the CEO of this new
Okay.
entity.
Okay. So, having successfully sold a company, you know, I hope it made you richer. But what do you think some of the challenges were and some of the learning points after that experience for you? And do you have any regrets?
Regrets, no. This was I think it was a very good pathway, and the timing was right. As I mentioned to you, it was something that was already on the table in terms of the
Yeah.
decision. So it wasn't something that came and we didn't have time to think about it. No, it was something we both wanted. So regrets, no. Of course, on the learning, is just to reiterate, this whole thing about the beauty of of being wise. And I say this often to people, who want to start businesses, is to have, and it's interesting, whether or not you plan to be acquired or not, or if that's your strategy, I think it's important to build a business with a sense of value and valuation, almost as if you have an acquisition exit strategy in mind. And the formula in that build is a healthy formula to build a successful business on, in terms of making sure that the value proposition is right, making sure that the financials are well laid, making sure that the business is scalable, making sure that in the instances, of course, not just with capital markets, where you have IP, intellectual property, that is well trademarked and licensed, making sure that you build a customer base, because an acquirer will come and there's different things that they may want. Do you see? And it's important to have. So it's just really looking at your business as to, if somebody came in, what can they take? Are you good enough? Are you worthy enough to price yourself in a certain way? What do you bring? So that regardless of challenges that could happen, there is something that is still attractive. You know what I mean? And the company is still valued, so to speak. And whether it's in the processes, whether it's in the customer base, whatever it is that is value, one should have that mindset of building that way and making sure that the corporate governance and things are in order, so that it's you're really building something of worth, so to speak.
Okay. You know why I asked the question about regret? Because sometimes there's a healthy conflict between keeping something, owning it, and then selling, because you might think to yourself later on that I could have grown it and still kept it and have ownership. Or how am I so sure that I couldn't have done all of this myself and still had a large chunk of the pie? So people have that internal conflict when it's time to sell. So I just wondered if you look back and you think, could I have done just as well if we had stayed on our own? you know
Yeah.
but I think Nigerians sometimes, maybe not Nigerians, people in general think that they, maybe want to own everything, but owning 100% of something small is not as good as owning maybe 1% of something pretty large. So I don't know what your thoughts are regarding that.
Yes, Bumi, I quite agree with you. And it's two-sided. That there's a part of it which sometimes is very myopic, wherein we want that pie and we don't want to share the pie, even though we see opportunity for growth. Then there's a part of it that's also sometimes reasonable to hold, wherein somebody sees value that you have that you don't see, and it makes sense to build that value yourself. But at the end of the day, it starts with knowing the path and knowing where you're trying to get to, and not being in a situation, not putting yourself, hopefully, in a situation where you are compromised to have to make a decision that was not your intention. Do you see? And in
Yeah.
this case, of course, we, as I mentioned to you, it was the intention. It made sense at the time. But I hear you, and sometimes it's that, and I'm faced sometimes with people I speak to about that conflict as to when and the why and then what not to. But and it literally sort of requires a lot of soul searching and introspection about the timing. Just recently, a younger friend was talking to me. Interestingly, a big consulting firm was speaking to her about acquiring her small business that she's put up somewhere. And I was so intrigued by it that what do they want? These people had the capital, they could do. And as she spoke to me, it was very clear what they wanted, that she had built a niche market in a particular area that they hadn't yet tapped into. She had built a clientele base and some reputation in that small area. And so for them, it was really just almost like as if they just wanted this unit. And then the unit sort of building this unit and getting staff themselves. Let us just acquire this young lady who's already doing it. And of course, they were offering her something very interesting. And it made so much sense. Of course, my advice to her was skewed based on what I thought she needed and wanted. And I gave her the caveat in giving myself as an example in certain things that you can afford to let go of, and certain things that you can't. And some of these things you have to wait. And I gave her an example of certain areas of uh, of of interest that perhaps in this space of my life will not be compromised, in that sense that I will not be letting off because, so it's many things to consider in terms of how personal it is to you, how much traction you can gain, what does collaboration mean, why should you sell, what is your intention. Sometimes we build these businesses for family, for legacy. Sometimes it's for,
Yeah.
so there's many things to think about. But of course, acquisitions are never a bad thing in and of themselves. And it's important even when you start the business to have a range or radar of options, to know what it is that you could be appealing to you and where you want the business headed, so that you're in front of the game, and you can make informed decisions when they do happen. But no simple answer to that. It really just depends on so many things. And in this case, no
Right.
regrets. Yes.
Okay. Thank God for that. Okay. I'm curious about something. So you, looking at your
Sorry,
profile,
because
you
it was skill. There was how much, and in this case, it was so clear. There was a place that we could not scale past
beyond.
beyond
Okay.
where we were and with the constraints that we had. And we're coming, of course, and speaking to these large institutions that had the muscle to take this further. It just made sense. And don't forget that we had the Primary Africa group that was now involved in other areas also of interest and business. So that was also a change and an alignment that was moving differently. So we're very aligned with the decision.
Okay. So my next question, I was wondering, I looked at your profile, I noticed you did a master's in 2019 from a school in Frankfurt, Frankfurt Business School.
Was
Is that
School of
the, I hope I
Finance and
get it
Management.
right. So, and you had worked for such a long time before doing the masters, and I always ask people this question because I wonder that, if you've acquired knowledge, as in practical knowledge and experience, what makes you go back to school? As in your opinion, the information that you gain from a formal education, especially a master's, does it trump um, actual experience? Plus, you did a master's in development finance, quite different
Capital.
from an MBA
Yes.
or capital markets. So was that you delving into a different line that you were interested in, or what informed your decision?
Okay, so that's a very good question for me. The first part of it is, I think nothing beats experience. And funny enough, my view had always been, every time I saw people who left school and jumped into a master's, I always thought, no, I mean, that's not even like, no, master's, it makes sense when you worked a bit so you can contextualize things, and because experience is just what experience is. Having said that, it was not my intention to have waited so long. Neither was it my intention to necessarily do it at the time I did. So when I finished school after a few years working, I had an opportunity to do a master's, but unfortunately there was some challenge on the family side that stopped that with my father's ill health. Um, and so we continued work. I had even taken time off. I had received, literally gotten my leave of absence to do the masters, but everything changed. And then we just continued work and work and work and work and work and life, and there was just never the chance to. But of course, building immense experience and luckily never needing or thinking that I was missing out on that opportunity of having not done a master's. So 2019, literally almost 22 or so years after school, after 22 years work experience, I decided to do a master's because it made sense. It was COVID time. There was a season that presented itself. In terms of the choice, I thought it was a beautiful intersection of what I did and where my heart was. Being very
Right.
keen. And so you asked me why not the MBA, why not the MSCs? Is that after 22 years of business and a lot of going through quite interesting business life cycles, at that point, in fairness and at the risk of sounding immodest, I felt that I had enough experience to teach an MBA, literally from the experiences I had been through building businesses. And I didn't think an MBA was fitting. Instead, because of other things that I was also interested in, I found that my heart was very big on the social, economic, and political challenges that developing nations face. And to be able to marry that with finance and to see how, finance work, how they come together and how we enhance developing economies and the challenges of developing economies through finance, that was more appealing to me. I was looking for something a little different. And then also Frankfurt School gave an interesting opportunity in terms of the flexibility of the program, and it worked well because it was COVID time. There was somewhat of a season that allowed that, and I took the opportunity, and very grateful that I did at the time. And so that was the decision. And so yes, 22 plus years is when I decided to do my master's, but it was well worth it. Totally aligned with my heart and my work. You see what I mean? So
Okay.
that's what happened in that case. But and it was beautiful. It's beautiful to have worked so long and then do a master's, and then it's more relevant. It's more apt.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to where your heart is in terms of impact and social responsibility. But before I go there, I think it would be unfair to my listeners not to ask you about your time on the reality show
Uh,
Next Titan. So maybe you can give us an idea of how you were approached to become a judge. I know that you more than qualify as a judge based on your wealth of experience, but maybe a little bit of the background as to how you started as a judge, and then some of the things you've learned or you've noticed from interacting with so many upcoming entrepreneurs. It could be helpful to people listening trying to start a business as well. Maybe some of the habits of good entrepreneurs and some of the habits of the ones that didn't succeed.
yes. So I've been on Next Titan is going to its 10th season this year. I've
Wow.
been on Next Titan since season 2, and I was approached by the executive producers of the production by referral. So they had
Okay.
asked somebody, I guess, to share with them who they thought would be good for the role. I guess obviously they were looking for a woman. They had other men on the board, and this person recommended based on what she knew I could do and my work on many skills, recommended me to them, and they did their research and approached me, and have been happy to keep me on the show for what is going on 9 years now, and it's been a very interesting experience meeting young entrepreneurs at different stages and being able to mentor and guide and help them sharpen their business acumen. And of course, in many instances, being there for some of them as mentors who post the show. To your second question about the what I see the common threads about who makes a successful entrepreneur. What I've learned, especially from this experience with Next Titan, is that to have a great idea is not enough. And everybody is excited about a great idea. Everybody thinks their product is the best thing. And in your head, it's always the best thing. And it's important to be persuaded about what you produce. But it's not enough. It's never enough. Is that what we don't do enough of is to add data to our product, is to add, how do I put this? And I see it happen so many times when you now drill down and you're like, okay, this idea is great. It sounds good on paper, but where is the market? Is this market enough to make a commercially viable business? Where is the scalability? What is the construct you find? And you ask all these questions and you find out that a good idea is not enough. And there's many layers of elements that one needs to quote that with. So imagine, for example, somebody has a fancy idea to build some laundromat around a certain area. And in your mind it's great. And you have this nice analysis you've done in your own head about the market size of that. But you didn't do enough to know if people in that area are even interested in that form of laundry business, whether from a cultural standpoint they prefer a certain way. And so you come up, start a business, and then you find out that you're wondering what happened to all these fancy business things I wrote, because the market, you didn't test the market, you didn't properly soundboard the market, you didn't ask, you didn't drill, you didn't consider how much marketing, for example, would have needed to have gotten the scale that you needed, and all these many elements which we try to put in the minds of the people. And of course, through the 12-week of being of rigor of being in the house, with all the tasks every week, what we're trying to do is to grill them and get them to hone their sales skills, get them to hone their networking skills, get them to understand business, how to write business plans, how to consider. So it's very rigorous like that, and is what I learned. And then in terms of what I've seen as the common thread to the successful entrepreneur is grit, is resilience. The ones who can push through and who have a staying power. And is this thing, Bunmi, let me digress, is this thing about I'm also finding it to be so true now as I look more and more as to the success points of a lot of entrepreneurs, this issue about sales. And so whenever I find young people who are, in sales jobs, especially in banks, and they're getting frustrated and they're tired of doing sales, and I'm always just trying to encourage them that there is something about this frustrating job that you're doing that is needed for the future, because there's so many people who come out who don't have the heart to deal with rejection, who don't have the heart to knock on doors. And it's a big part of a successful business, that you can't start a business just on a great idea and think that things will just fall over for you. You have to push through. You have to be able to sell yourself and accept rejections and press on and convince and all of that. So I find that some people just don't have that, and that's where I guess the sales skills is always such a positive addition to an entrepreneur's journey. And so, but grit, yes, people who are, they're just extremely persuaded about what they want to do, and just persevere regardless of challenges. And when challenges happen, they want to bring all that they can to make sure that it works, and are not people that easily give up.
Right. Interesting stuff. In terms of grit and the stamina to withstand when things are not going right, do you think it helps when you have a co-founder, when you're not the only one? Because, having a co-founder could be an advantage and a disadvantage depending on the compatibility of the
Yeah.
the individuals, or the groups of individuals coming together. So what's your opinion in terms of um, founding a business?
So I have found that partnerships help a lot. A lot of the times, one person doesn't have it all. Usually there's somebody else who has a strength that you don't have. And I've seen enough cases of people who, because of wanting to go alone, have failed, wherein partnerships could have been a good complement. Having said that, I'm careful not to make it a template, because there's no template. Different people's journeys and different experiences. Also, sometimes the different intentions, even for your business, might not allow that. And then sometimes partnerships does not always have to be in co-founder. Co-founders are great, but sometimes it could just be in, more important, I guess, is getting the right people to support the business in the ways that need to. And if they're in co-founder roles, why not? If you can find people like that who share your values. But then there are a lot of complexities with that, getting somebody who you share such chemistry with. Because sometimes
Yeah.
if you're just two different people, and things are not itemized and properly planned and documented, it can become very messy. I've seen also very messy partnerships. So I think more important is just really having the right people to give the support that the businesses need at the times they do, not necessarily as co-founder, as in all cases.
Right. Okay. And based on the virtue of your different roles, I know that you'll be very attractive as someone as for someone who has a company that's looking for board members, you know. So what do you look at to decide on whether to take a board appointment or not?
Um, for me, I have gained over the years a lot of skills that are universal and not necessarily sector specific. And so slightly agnostic on my case from a sectorial standpoint. But I'm very persuaded about the things that are of interest to me that also align with my brand and my story and what I'm trying to achieve. So because I know fundamentally what that is, it's very easy for me to spot or know what I shouldn't, be associated with. But also from a governance standpoint, because boards are really essentially about governance.
Yeah.
One needs to be very aware of what they're putting themselves in. While you are there to help and give that guidance on the governance side, it's also important for me to know the heart of the people behind the business, to be sure that there are people in the first instance who even want the governance. And so I would not be, put myself up in a space that, where that is, I know is easily compromised. And so, yes, essentially that.
Okay. Okay. Cool stuff. Okay. So I want to digress a bit back to impact. I guess, or I've read or I've learned that after a certain stage in life, one begins to want more. It's no longer just about money, it's about the lives that you can change ultimately, you know. So I get the sense of possibly why you started some of the social enterprises you've started. But if you can give us an idea of your thinking in terms of delving into the theatrics, that's the screenplay, you know, because it's so different from finance, you know. So what was the motivation behind that? What were you trying to achieve? You know, how did you get the funding? You know, what went into everything?
Okay, so I'm really I'm really a big believer in the fact that we're all quite multidimensional,
Yeah.
and I have a healthy respect for bearing fruits, as much fruits as we have been given the gifts planted in us.
Yeah.
And I'm also grateful for wise counsel and guidance, of course, from God that I have leaned into over the years that has guided my path. Such that there was a time when I was getting very bored of finance and I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm tired of finance. I don't want to do this. I'm done. I want to do other things. My interest is, and I'm thankful for the counsel to stay. That why can't we can do this and still nurture these other interests that we have. So in the
Exactly.
past years, and this wasn't something that I jumped to, many years back when I started having that restlessness, it was then me deciding to just begin to put my hands in those things that I love. If it was training, if it was things in the arts, if it was in the social space, in the non-governmental space, I started volunteering and helping. I was helping with the CIS community, helping with different things that were giving me an avenue, an outlet to those things that I love to do. I was also, perhaps subconsciously or not knowing, or knowingly, unwittingly, learning a lot of skill that I was developing. I didn't even realize I was developing. So that I then found joy. But at some point, and this is the thing about, I guess, using the seasons of our lives well, and that we now
Yeah.
got into the season where I had some bandwidth in terms of my time management, in terms of my role, in terms of the expectations, where I could go deeper with the other things that I wanted. So I didn't just sort of wake up, one day and do it. With so a lot of what I do, was that way. Um, and with the play, with the Osamede play, it was not something that I planned, Bumi. It was something that came to me. I had quite a journey, quite a wilderness journey in 2018. It was a very tough year for me. And in that, and yet, let me backtrack. So the Osamede play is what I would call a cultural or traditional adaptation or play on the story of Queen Esther, the biblical story of Queen Esther, which to me is a story of nationhood, and it's a story that foreshadows Christ. So I was going through this tough time in 2018. I'll save you the details of that. But I was very drawn to the story of Esther and picking up a lot from that book of the Bible. So come 2019, I'm having this moment, and this is quite a personal moment of worship to God around the victories of all the challenges from 2018. And it was in that moment of worship that I literally felt that this story came. Let me put it that way. I wasn't looking, like it just came that I could, and it came. And even I saw it, even with the picture of the Edo culture representation, everything. Of course, with time, I've also seen that there's a lot more to it in terms of, just perhaps why God would have given me that to do and things like that. But that was how that came. And of course, it came like many things that we get in life. And I guess I could have sat on it, but I didn't. And so I picked it up. I held it very strongly in my heart. I felt convinced it was something I was to do. And so I picked up by now looking for the pathways to executing. So it took me a good 2 years thinking through, eventually fleshing out what I wanted to tell, the message, relating it to Nigeria, relating it to the cultural influences, relating it. Then, of course, heading to a scriptwriter to help develop it. Eventually, it became two scriptwriters. Then I had known, of course, about an artistic director whose work I had seen in the past that I loved, and I had penned him down that he's somebody I would like to work with. And so I then approached him, and of course things aligned. It was literally something he also had been looking to do. It was something that he had been looking for expression for. So this was perfect chemistry on that level. And we spent what was 5 months with execution. And of course, as you said, like the fundraising, which is the key part. I think it helped that I had business skill. And so I brought that to the table. That what I then found, of course, a lot of the pure creatives, and I've always loved the arts. Close friends of mine say I'm also creative. I don't know if I am really, but yes, I guess I am. But I find that the pure creatives, they're one-sided. They're purely one-sided, and the business side sometimes is missing. And so being able to bring that to the table by understanding what I needed for this project, by being very rational with the expectation of where income would come from and how I needed sponsorships and all of that. And so I went with as much energy as I would business, with hitting hard and looking for sponsorships for the play. And again, back to what I was saying about sales and just the rigor, that in the first play we did in 2021, which was commercially successful. I had about 10 sponsors. And people said to me, "Oh, how did you get 10 sponsors? That's a lot. You must have really hit." And I said to somebody recently, I sent out almost 40 proposals. So if I got 10,
Well.
Imagine how many no's I got. You get what I mean?
So this is your second.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I thought it was your
Oh, no, no,
first.
we've done it twice. We've had like 12 shows of Osamide now. We did it 2021 and 2022. So 2022, we made it a little better. We worked on
Okay.
it, and yeah. So yes, we brought all that we had to try and showcase this because it was a very strong message, and I believe in the product, and I think it's important that I work it to the fullness of which it can be worked, especially because it came to me, and so I need to do my best with it. And so that has been the journey for Osamide, and I've always been very interested in communications generally and in creative arts and all of that. So part of that production arm of Gold Lilies, of course, is expressing all those creative sides while telling a message that I believe is impactful, that sends messages that really just make for thought and for impact.
So are you working on other stories, or we're going to see much more of this one in the seasons to come?
Yes, we're working on this one to see how much. Yes, we're working to extend this and other iterations of
Okay.
this stage play of Osamede brand
Okay.
for now, and then you would see. But I'm not done with the Osamede story.
All right. Fantastic. So you've achieved so much. What do you think is the secret to execution? Because everybody has ideas, but the person that's successful is the person that can successfully take the ideas and make them real. So if you were to be asked what precisely were or is the secret to execution, what would you say it is?
Hmm. I don't know if there's one secret, right? And I can only tell you.
Or the many secrets?
Yes, yes, yes. And so, um, it's firstly to be. You know how the Bible speaks of the virtuous woman, and it says that she perceived that her product was good, and then she burned the midnight oil, like she stayed awake. It's first of all to be persuaded about what you have. You know what I mean? I'm persuaded that I have a good product. And I guess when that persuasion is moved, then it becomes a time, oh, but no, I know we have something good. If anything, is how do I make it better? How do I get it to the people who need it? How do I get it to the market that appreciates it? It's all of those things. So I think that persuasion is key in whatever it is that we're doing. And then it's also just being um, action oriented and wise enough to understand the pathways, the route to markets, the route to success, and following through as methodically and aggressively as one can. And I'm careful not to also make template out of it because different people have different ways. You know what I mean? I have a
Yeah.
close friend who's just when they say someone is anyhow anyhow, and I was saying to her recently that I suspect that if she becomes too and she
Rigid.
gets she gets things done, there will be success even though there was an anyhowness around the way. She gets things done, and I said to her that I suspect that if she then becomes to become a methodical person, maybe that's when things will now not be happening. So I realized that people are just different, in terms of how they get. But at least she's very goal oriented. She knows what she wants. Her path might be different, and of course, there's no template to these things. Everybody's path is important for you to know also what you bring and do that to the best of your ability because we're all gifted differently. We all have different assignments, and so I can't even use somebody else's, you know, method for my journey. You know what I mean? So it's if there's something in your heart to do, it's your skill and your ability that will get it done for that thing you need, and maybe for something else you're not able to. So just being very true to your patterns, the patterns of your life, understanding how it is that God deals with you through you, and following through on your strengths and just yeah, staying focused.
Do you know? Okay. I was going to say that the typical answer I get is your second point, as in being actionable. not the first. But your first point resonates with me so well. I think it's the best answer I've heard so far, as in believing in what you're doing, the product, because actually that will give you the motivation to be actionable. Actually, because if you don't even believe in what you're selling, then you would not have the energy or the strength to actually pursue
Yes.
the action that is required.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
that's
To me,
really
it's very
important.
key, but it's not a blind belief also. That it's not,
Yeah.
it's one that also you can draw counsel on, that you are persuaded, but it's important to even get a sense. But when you now, so it's not so much that, something, sometimes you can be convinced about something that's not viable, right, or good. And
Yeah.
then you don't want to listen. Everybody's telling you wisely, this thing is not like, no, 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 it's my own, it's my own. So it's a balance of doing the work, of also getting feedback, and then, you know, fine tuning where you have to fine tune to make it the best. You know what I mean? And then being
Yeah.
convinced that you then have. You know what I mean? So it's not, yeah, but it's very key, because if you don't have that belief, then things will come in and then you will just be swayed, and you don't. The persuasion, I think, is key. The persuasion is very key.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to move away a bit from your artistic side and ask you about um, the NGO you co-founded. That's
So,
Drug Aid Africa. Yes. So please explain that to me.
what kind of explanation do you need?
Your motivation for starting. How do you balance everything? How do you find the right people to help? Because it's one thing to start things and then stop, but to have multiple things that are coexisting and are all successful is actually a very difficult thing to do. And I know that it would be helpful to understand all of these things and then to understand how you pick people, because I know people might be very key to your success because you can't be in all places at all times. So how do you navigate all those things? And I know I've asked you so many things in one question, but I can repeat any one of them that you
Okay.
might forget.
Yeah, let me try to remember everything you've said. It's first of all how we started.
Yes. What was the
Okay.
motivation for
Yes,
starting it?
yes, yes. So, huh, two things. Okay, let me give you a short answer. Um, Two things happened similar time that came together. One was that my mother had passed. We had a lot of her drugs, which were pretty expensive drugs that I thought were wasting. And I thought, looking at them, and I thought, can there be people who need these drugs that couldn't afford it? And I remember how tough it was getting these things, and then shouldn't there be a way to pass this medication on? And I went to a few pharmacies just trying to ask, are there people, who you can donate these drugs, to, and there was nothing. And I thought, wouldn't it be good to have something wherein people who can't afford drugs can benefit from people who have extra drugs? Or, of course, the model has changed, and that's not the model now for drug aid, but that was the part, that was where the thought came, that couldn't we have, why is there not something like that, where drugs could be
Yeah.
vetted? Of course, I know how sensitive drugs are, vetted and being able to be distributed by people who, or how it is, we buy drugs, maybe the medication of Panadol, and we just use a few, and then the rest is discarded, and they
Yeah.
expire. I just thought, shouldn't there be a system? But also, at a certain time, at that sort of similar time, I was also just burdened. I was going through the slight financial challenge, and in the middle of thinking about what I wanted to do to try and grow my finances, I just felt burdened to use the little I had to help instead, remembering there were so many people worse off than I was. And so it started with with that thought. And of course, at the same time, I was thinking that a friend of the family was also thinking something similar, had called me, and we decided to do something together in terms of some support and aid we gave to people in hospitals. And then, of course, developing and fleshing that thought we had around the medical support. And in this process of fleshing that up, that was meant to be one part of drug aid. But eventually, I found that part is a little bit more complicated. And so for now, drug aid, of course, just morphed into clearly just giving free medical support to indigent patients, just patients who can't afford healthcare. the premise, of course, just being burdened by people who just really believing healthcare is the start. You know what I mean? Like you have to
Yeah.
healthcare is the base, like upon which you then live life. And in having those charity expressions to hospitals, seeing just what it means, even just small amounts mean to human people's lives, and people who can't get out of hospitals just because of or people who happen to lose family just for money that relatively small amounts of money. So coming together and building that and trying to help. So the idea, we started off trying donating drugs to for 6 prevalent medical conditions to 2 public hospitals in Nigeria, in Lagos, and then we morphed into some rehabilitation centers and refuge homes, giving support drugs, prescription based and general. Then we morphed into outreaches in indigent communities, which has been now the most vibrant part of drug AIDS work. So if it's eye communities, if it's for eye healthcare, if it's malaria, just different. And then, of course, because we're doing this, there are lots of people who come to us. So almost the demand side is endless pool of people who need
Yeah.
that collaboration, who are doing interesting things in communities and then come to us for support, and we do stuff together. So in terms of the funding, when we started, clearly we, the founders, were the sole supporters. We were doing this literally out of pocket. In the first year of our establishing, we got became partners of Global Giving. Global Giving, I don't know if you know about it. It's a it's an international fundraising platform who do a rigorous due diligence on your non-government and open you up to sponsors. And
Fun.
so right now we
Yeah.
have people who are committed. We have people who donate almost on a monthly basis from different
Wow.
parts of the world into different projects, and we continue to look for local funding. We just started now a small pipeline of some institutional local institutions who are now funding, helping to fund some projects. And so it grows growing like that. It hasn't been an easy journey, but we're just taking the strides and trying to help where we can. It's just a huge need. I'm also a strong believer that society is built from all these elements. That it's
Yeah.
government, it's private sector, it's civil societies, all of us owing to make the nations healthier, and just and the need is there. And so if we've been blessed, we must be
A
blessing.
blessing.
Yeah, and that's the mindset I hold.
So my last question: how do you balance it all?
Ah, I don't know. I get asked this quite a bit, and I don't even have a perfect answer. I don't know how to balance it because I just balance it. But this is the truth for me. And I think it's this idea of micro balance versus macro balance. It's not every phase of my life that I would have been able to or have been able to do this. There were seasons of my life where I was optimizing such that in this season there are many things I can do now with a certain ease because certain things were laid up in certain times. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so maybe I couldn't have been doing all of this 6 years ago. But there's a space now that allows me to, having built a lot of structure in certain areas, that I can move to some, so it's many things. um you know what I mean? So it's time there were
Yeah.
times, of where things were opportunities. There were times when I was, doing a lot of voluntary volunteering work, building skill. So some things that I do now, perhaps with an ease that I might not have been able to do with that same ease if I didn't have that skill set. There are
Yeah.
certain times of life, if it was when the children were younger, as I mentioned to you, when it was really just housewife mode, everything coming together. There were times when I was putting in as much as I could on the educational front at the times when, so it's a bit of a coming together, but more than that, yeah. So I think I think that right now the time afforded it, and because my hands were already in, it just sort of had a natural and organic pathway to how these things have evolved, and I'm loving it. I love that I can find these expressions of the different parts of me, and that I'm living it out, and not all of it. It's not always just even just multiple income. Sometimes it's just multiple avenues to impact. It's multiple avenues to just be yourself and to find joy. And nothing that I'm doing is unnatural to me. Everything has really been home. It has just been what I felt strongly led to do, and there has been grace throughout the journey. There's been grace through it, and I try to live a led life, a spirit-led life that guides me in terms of the timing and the ways and the hows. And as you had mentioned or you had asked, I remember now about the people. And really, sometimes the assignment is in the doing, and then you create the form, and God fills it. And that
Yeah.
literally some of the things that the elements came. You know what I mean? Like even with play,
Yeah.
that you have the idea, and then all of a sudden you're speaking to people, and then you realize your idea was even tied to them. They were almost you needed to respond or to answer for their own answer, and they're literally almost always around, ready to be there. So we have a great program manager on the Drugate side who's doing a phenomenal work. And the way we found him was amazing. And it was almost like he was made for this role. Do you get? And so we
Yeah.
created it, and he came along. We found him, and he's perfect. He's doing an amazing job. Um, and he, loving what he's doing, and helping to grow that organization, and just everything with every other part as well. It's been just being able to identify finding those people who, and it always connects. I mean, that's the way I can say it, at least from what I've seen, that when you're in obedience to your path, your journey, the dots connect. They come, the support comes, the graces are there, the favor comes. When you're in your path and aligned to what your assignment is. So yeah, I balance by balancing, and I don't overstretch in that sense. I really do, because as much as I seem to be doing a lot, I'm also big on on the mental health, and sanity and space and love and life and being in the moment. And so it's not that one is overstretching in that sense. It's just really doing the things that one loves to
That
do.
you love.
Yes.
It's been fantastic talking to you. As in, I don't think I've enjoyed the conversation because you have such a quiet, graceful way of speaking that I mean, it's lovely to listen because you say a lot and you say it in such a way that it's easy to understand. So I want to thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and all the knowledge that you've shared. Um, and I'd have one more request for you. We're trying to build a community and we have to keep the conversation going. And that can only be done if we continually have people that are willing to share their knowledge and share their experience. So I usually ask each guest to refer someone else who will be willing to share
Oh,
their experience as well. So I'll be reaching out to you after the show for a referral if you have one. It's not compulsory, it's totally
with,
voluntary.
with, with absolute pleasure, Bumi. With absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed being here. I've enjoyed sharing. Enjoyed learning as
All
well.
right. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Bumi.